University of Zurich, where I went in and saw Einstein's locker. So, like JT said, they cleaned all the dirty gym socks out, but they still have a little momentum up for him. So we'll get right into the meat of the presentation today, because the whole point we're talking about is a conversation. And if you think a conversation is kind of a pass off thing that you don't need to worry too much about or think about, I want you to think of your life exactly the way it is. Same family, same friends, same car, same dog, same car, everything, except you don't talk to another human. Think that would affect your life at all? Conversations not only are critically important, conversations are simply the essence of life. And how to have a good conversation can mean the difference, quite frankly, between a good life and maybe a not so good one. So we're going to talk a little bit today about that. This session was about having a uncomfortable, a hard conversation, but we're going to take it from a different angle. Because if you don't know, if you ever decide to go work for the Mint, the U.S. Mint, one of the ways they train people to detect counterfeit bills is they don't hand you counterfeit bills. They hand you real ones. And you spend day after day, hour after hour handling millions of bills, real ones, and you get an unconscious sensation, a feel for what they feel like. So when somebody slips a counterfeit in, you pick it up almost immediately. So we're going to talk about the characteristics of a comfortable conversation, and then hopefully highlight some issues that you might run into with an uncomfortable one. So I want everybody, for about 15 seconds, I'm going to ask you to close your eyes here in just a second. But Larry has installed software on this Zoom call, and you agreed to it when you signed up. So if you go to sleep when your eyes are closed, the alarm goes off. So don't go to sleep. But I want you to close your eyes right now, and I want you to think about a very, very enjoyable conversation you had in the last year. Might have been with a friend, might have been family, colleague, whatever. I want you to think about, was it day or night? Were you inside or outside? Who was it? What were you? Do you remember what you were talking about? What the main points? What were the sounds around you? And then when that sinks in, most importantly of all, what did you feel during that conversation and then after that conversation? Okay, now you can open your eyes. Anybody want to share a little bit about that? You don't have to, but if you would care, share a little bit about that conversation. Anyone?
Well, I'll share if you guys can hear me. I
We
don't know
can.
why I don't have video on today. It's not working here. But I'd say for me, it's with a dear friend. We're in a prayer group that meets once a month. And we've done this for like 10 years now. And it was just two of us that came that night, and she and I. And we sat for about an hour and a half where we were, and we just really got very personal about things that bothered us, where it was concerning husbands or whatever, and just really told some truths. And it felt really good with the two of us. So we pray for each other all the time now, and, just kind of discuss. We prayed anyway, but now I pray for her daily, and I know she prays for me. And it was evening, was the time of day, but it just left me with such a good feeling. And I still, when I think about it, I feel really good.
Anyone else? Well, I've had I honest to goodness, this is a true statement. If you ask the family and close friends, they'll tell you I've said this before to them. I spent a career in the military. I've traveled the world, and to be honest, I've seen most of it. And don't get me wrong, I enjoy traveling, enjoy seeing places, but mountains are mountains, and I live in Colorado. So you got mountains. What do you do? So do I. Beaches, I've seen all over the world. I've seen US beaches, I've seen European beaches, I've seen Mediterranean beaches, seen some Pacific beaches or beaches. I don't really care to travel much anymore to see geography of the world or even major cities, because after a while, after the IMF and the World Bank, all cities kind of look alike anyway. What I travel for is the people. And this morning, I had one of the best conversations, very short, um, me and my daughter were on the train going into Zurich. And actually, my son-in-law just got off and we were on the tram, the bus kind of thing going in. And I'm standing there holding my backpack. Well, it's over one shoulder and there's this lady behind me and I don't realize it. But as I'm turning around, I'm like kind of almost hitting her in the face with this backpack. Well, she very politely, kind of tapped me and I realized what I'm doing. And I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And I know about there you are, Sherry. And I know about 4 words of German other than schnitzel and beer. So we chatted a little bit. But then Riley, my daughter, speaks a little bit of German. But this lady, who's like she was 90 years old and retired nurse, spoke pretty good English because she had learned English to work for the U.S. military at Ramstein years ago. And for the next 10 minutes, we just had the most enjoyable conversation. She told us about her life and, working as a nurse and coming back to retire. And of course, my daughter's a nurse and they were kibutzing on that. It was really enjoyable. So honest to goodness, one of the things I enjoy probably as much or more than anything else in life other than a glass of tea is a good conversation. And when you really stop and look at it, I think a good conversation is a microcosm of life. I have had some of the most grievous emotions I could ever imagine in a conversation. I've also had some of the most sublime emotions in a conversation. So life is essentially a conversation. So when we talk about conversations, it's not like this little box we take out, we use it, and we put back. No, this is the essence of life, good, bad, or indifferent. Life is a conversation. So we'll talk a little bit about some of the characteristics of a comfortable conversation. We'll see as we go through this if some of these points resonate with your memory and your experience. So comfortable. As you can see, you guys can probably read that, I think. Affording mental or spiritual comfort. That's kind of what you mentioned, Sherry. I had this good conversation. When it felt done, I felt spiritually and emotionally at peace and contented and connected. Pleasant, agreeable. So, there's a quote at the end, that of being in a state of tranquil enjoyment. I can't think of a better way to really describe a good conversation. And ultimately, this term, we especially in English. I mean, English has like 1.5 million words, and it's this kludge of all the half the rules and 3/4 of the words from all the other languages in the world. So we don't know half of what they mean or what we use them. But ultimately, conversation comes from a place that meant like a course of actions to converse, to actually do together. As you can see, to live well, keep company with. It's a community word. It's a relationship word. And ultimately, if you peel all the onion layers back and look at the structure behind it, what it means is the bottom, to turn together in a comforting manner. And I think that's probably one of the best descriptions I've ever heard of a good conversation. And even sometimes if it's an uncomfortable one, if it's a good one, and we are turning together to kind of come to some sort of agreement, some sort of common perspective. We're turning together in a manner. Does that resonate with anybody? How about you, Larry? I'll hit you up because I know you kind of mentioned it a second ago. You had an uncomfortable conversation with your kids here not too long ago.
Yeah, and I love the idea of, in the picture you have here, it's like a dance, right? It's if you've ever danced with someone, somebody's got a lead and somebody is following, but it's the motions together that make the dance beautiful. And those conversations that we've had, and when we've been having over our pet, if you're a pet owner, you understand what it's like because it's a part of the family. And we have to take in everybody's personality, everybody's perspective. I deal with, trauma differently than my wife does, right? She's very detailed oriented. She wants to have all the information possible to make a decision. Me, I'm really quick. It's like, I know where we're going, know what we need to do, whether we like it or not, we got to make a decision. But I can't operate that way because I'm not alone. This is part of that journey and that dance together. So yeah, I love the way you're portraying this.
Yeah, our family went through what unfortunately Larry and his family are dealing with right now last year with our, I guess a year and a half ago now, our Labradoodle, 14 and a half years. It was time. And it was not a good conversation to have. But at the end, we were turning together in a comforting manner. So, again, conversation is life. So some of the characteristics you might, some of see if this resonates with you at all. There's a balance. Now, this is probably why I don't think that Sunday morning sermons are the best communication process in between humans because there's no symmetry there. There's no balance. I mean, most of the time I get into a lesson or a sermon about 3 or 4 sentences in, I have a question. And you don't get to ask that, at least not the Baptist churches I came from. Stood up, 3 points poem and a word about tithing, and then hit the parking lot for the Piccadilly cafeteria as quick as you could. But in a good conversation, there's balance, there's give and there's take. And we talk a lot about nonverbals. And that's very important in a good conversation because you read body language. I mean, if somebody comes in like that, it's probably not because they're relaxed and happy to see you. But understanding body language, expression, tone, because then you can begin to pick up on that when I'm done and that person is ready to talk. We do this unconsciously when we're in symmetry, when we're in balance. Now, I've been in situations and sometimes in more formal situations. Anybody know what a talking stick is? So I've used this in military units before. We get in the room and we're trying to discuss maybe something a little contentious or a lot of different viewpoints, or whatever. Commander would literally pull out he had a stick. And when you had the stick, you talked. Everybody listened. And then when you were done, you passed the stick, and whoever got the stick then also took it. Maybe not the best way, but it is an organizational structure. It kind of keeps things flowing. I've been in situations like that where it's been effective. It's better, I think, if, again, everybody's kind of engaged at that emotional level and you start reading that body language a little bit. Turn taking. Smooth, respectful exchanges where pauses, eye contact, or tone shifts signal. That's what we're talking about. When you're really present in the conversation, especially if it's somebody from your own culture, from your own language group, from your own, political or not political, but social and cultural group, you are aware of the mores and the norms and the customs. And when you're connected and focused like that, it flows. Active listening. Now, that's one of those things that's very critical and sometimes sort of hard for people to get a handle on. Genuine attention, yep, nods, I got you, know what you said. But many of us, too many times, are basically building our own arguments while the other person is talking. I'm building my reputation for why you're wrong. That's not listening. Anybody ever been in a situation like that where the other person really wasn't hearing what you said? They were just kind of building their argument against you?
Yeah, Brett.
Yeah. Once or twice.
Hey, sorry, I'm not on video because I'm actually eating. I'm kind of double duty today, so I'm actually eating lunch, having these crucial conversations. But yes, I would say that I'm guilty of it as well as my ex-wife. And every time we have conversation, there's not a lot of active listening that goes on either side. Is whereas I am human, and I'm not great at it for sure.
Well, it really requires a little bit of focus and I guess maturity on the part of both people, because when somebody is actively listening, it means when I am done talking, they're not ready just yet to jump in. So I'm done talking, I'm arguing with Larry about something. And if Larry is truly listening to me, hearing what I'm saying, reading between the lines, feeling the emotion a bit, when I'm done speaking, it might take him a couple of seconds to formulate his thought. But if I'm unwilling to sit there quietly for that pregnant pause, then I'm going to jump in right on top of him again. And Larry doesn't get a word in edgewise.
So which is normally our conversations, Brett.
That's normally how it goes. Right.
Brett, can I throw one thing in real quick? You
Please.
mentioned the talking stick before, and I've heard a different permutation of the talking stick where, yes, the basic rule is you're the one who's leading the conversation. You're the one who's talking when you have the talking stick. But a permutation of this is you don't hand over the talking stick until somebody else has reflected what you said in a way that you feel like you've been heard. So you don't relinquish the talking stick until somebody has repeated back to you and you feel like, all right, they got what I wanted to say out of this conversation. So it almost forces some active listening and some reflection and understanding, which I think is like you said, it's one of the most important parts of conversation is understanding that actually takes place, not just the verbs and nouns that are conveyed.
I think it's a key point. I mean, it really is. I mean, I've done classes and had classes on active listening, but it takes the person who is actually listening and waiting until everybody is kind of on that same, I understand what you're saying now. Then I can respond with some kind of clarity or coherence. The other piece of it is, kind of clarity and brevity. I mean, if I didn't stop and ask for questions at some point in this class, but until I get to the end, if I sit here and talk for 45 minutes and then ask for questions, if you did have a question, you've long forgotten it and probably fell asleep by the time I'm done. So it's this interactive exchange, which is why, usually when I teach any kind of classes, I try to drag people in as much as possible, because I not only do I want to make sure you're getting what I'm trying to get across, but I want to know what you're not getting and what you're going to teach me, because your questions, simply asking a question, teaches and tells me a whole lot. It tells me maybe I need to explain this point, or it causes me to think about something in a way I never did before. I've taught for a lot of years in a lot of venues, and honest to goodness, the reason I like teaching is because I like learning. And whether I teach a different subject matter or content, or whether I'm teaching the same subject matter to different people, I'm always learning something new, because everybody that walks into any class brings a unique perspective. And I don't care how many times I've been over this material, another human being will show me something I didn't see before. But that clarity and brevity, short kind of segments rather than the long monologues. Anybody have an experience with that? The professor that speaks forever and then says, I remember I had this one professor. He would, we had a 50-minute class. He would lecture nonstop. I mean, you couldn't breathe hardly between words for about 47 minutes, and then go, questions. And we're all like, no. And I think he thought he was the greatest instructor ever, and we were just like, it's not worth the trouble.
Yeah, your brain is too tired.
My brain is too tired. I mean, it's kind of like food. Most doctors will tell you it's better off, instead of eating 2 or 3 big meals in a day, if you're going to eat that same amount of calories, kind of bust it up. That way it doesn't. I always remember, used to, when I mowed grass as a kid down in the South, you let it go on too long and the grass gets up real heavy and thick, and I'm pushing the mower and I push it too fast. I could just hear that engine drag down as all that grass hits the blades, and then maybe it'll pick back up again if I don't choke the engine out. Well, it's kind of like clarity and brevity. If I sit here and talk for an hour, it just overwhelms you. Short segments, clarity and brevity, and then you can actually respond on point.
Yeah, I was in a networking event last week, and it was done extremely well. It was a friend of mine put it on, and she had micro learning throughout the event. So we were there for about an hour and 15 minutes, and then she brought in like 5-minute micro learning sessions from other consultants, coaches, business owners that came in. And it's like, I remember every one of them, versus if she had just piled one person up there to talk for an hour, I probably wouldn't have remembered anything they said. So that little micro pieces, I think, had a better impact on everybody who was there.
Hey, Brett, I also think that's kind of the whole point behind the TED Talk of being 18 minutes, right? It's not supposed to be an elongated dissertation. Obviously, the Gettysburg Address is another really great example of kind of the proceeding, and it's one of those things no different than, these are all kind of buzzwords or talking points now: active listening, emotional intelligence. People say those things, they use them, they kind of frivolously and throw them around, but we're not really great at actioning them. That's the part that we're not good at. And a lot of folks feel like they need more is more, as opposed to less being more, for the clarity and brevity piece. And I'm guilty of those things from time to time too. And it's something I'm always trying to be aware of, for sure.
I had and it's something I thought about earlier. I don't know if we've mentioned it much. Many times when we talk about a conversation, we think of, one person conversation. Doesn't have to be. It can be a group of people. I mean, quite frankly, a staff meeting, in my opinion, well, it is in fact, and it should be more like a conversation. I had one wing commander when I was in that had average, and I mean average, 3.5 hour weekly staff meeting stand-ups. And they were as painful as you think they would be. I was there when the wing commander, swapped out. And so the way they do it in the military is the new guy comes in, new guy or gal, and they shadow the commander around for a few days to kind of meet people and get a handle on stuff. And when we're doing this, the new commander, after this one staff meeting, he pulled us aside and said, "We won't be doing that anymore." He said, "My staff meetings will be 15 minutes, 15 to 20 minutes." And we were all like snickering behind his back going, "Yeah, okay, sure, we understand." Next week, change of command. In the morning, shake, shake, salute, salute. Everybody's out. The old guy's out. The new guy's in. All the executive staff gets together in the command room. And he stood up and goes, "Okay, what do you got?" And and this is the way, in my opinion, you should run these group conversations. Anything that's said in the meeting should be the business of everybody in the meeting. Okay. So if we're having a conversation in this forum, everybody should be talking about a conversation. If I need to talk to one of you about a related matter that doesn't involve the rest of you, I need to save that. I need to save that for later, make an appointment with you somehow. I don't need to waste everybody's time talking to JT about something only is the business or concern for me and JT, and you're all sitting there twiddling your thumbs. So this guy stood up and he went around to all the group commanders. Bam, bam, bam. Anybody, any alibis? Okay. And a couple of them, he would go, "No, hold that, get on my calendar. Hold that, get on my calendar." And he ran from that point on. We timed it. We averaged 18-minute staff meeting. Never a loss of productivity, never a problem. Unit did great. Okay. So it's not a matter of management per se. It's a matter of, quite frankly, how to have a conversation. So balance, turn taking, active listening, and clarity, brevity, wonderful things. Other things, positivity and warmth. Believe it or not, a good conversation should actually feel good. And if I'm feeling good, I should have maybe a little smile on my face. Maybe I throw a joke in every now and again. Maybe I laugh at myself. But this is a relaxed thing. I sprinkle in to keep it, as it says, inviting and light. I can't tell you right now much about all the sermons I heard in my life, but I tell you what I can tell is the jokes and the illustrations they used. Because that's what gave me that key that locked that memory piece right there. And I remember the stories because we live stories and we learn and we tell stories. So if you want to have a good conversation, tell a story. Tell a story. Be part of the story. There was a law defense attorney, Casper, Wyoming, in the 80s. Forget his name right now. Very flamboyant character. Wore a big white $10 cowboy hat and a big fringe leather jacket. And in the 80s was making $1,000 an hour as a defense attorney. He wrote a book called How to Win Any Argument Every Time. Boils down to two things. Number one, got to tell the truth. Now, my version of truth might not be your version of truth, but to myself, I'm being honest and I'm expressing the truth as I see it. He said that is a irreversible first step, but that's not sufficient. That's required, but not sufficient. You have to make people feel. You have to tickle that emotion. You have to anchor that emotion with something. So if you can tell the truth, and usually a story is a great way to make people feel. It's why Jesus told so many parables. That's why people write novels today. I mean, some of the greatest illustrations of human behavior come from novels because we can see it in our minds. We can visualize the drama of that life. So making people feel positivity and warmth, respect for boundaries. Ever been in a conversation you thought was going to go one way and then suddenly took a 90-degree turn because somebody brought something up that somebody else wasn't ready for? Ever had that experience? The point of having any conversation whether it's considered uncomfortable or comfortable, is both people have to be a part of that conversation. And so if you get blindsided by something, you get surprised, that's not necessarily the makings of a comfortable conversation. If I take my wife out for dinner and I'm wanting to have an enjoyable evening, talk about the day, and then she suddenly pulls on me something that I've screwed up last week and she never told me about, but now she dumps it on me, probably not the conversation I was hoping for. Maybe we can save that and we'll discuss it later. But understanding, people's boundaries, what they're ready to hear, what they're ready to talk about. Once again, kind of related to that is flow and relevance. If you start chasing rabbits constantly, you're going to lose people. And it doesn't mean it has to be a formal plan for every conversation, but if we're just meeting at the coffee shop and we're having a conversation because we want to kill a little time and just kind of enjoying being with each other, as long as we both agree that's what we're there for, it's a good time. If I'm there to have a good time, but somebody is there to beat my chops about something I failed to do or that I need to do, again, we're not gonna connect here. We're looking for connection. That's ultimately what a conversation is. Emotional safety. This is, this kind of goes without saying, even in some uncomfortable conversations. It's one of the greatest skills in life is to disagree without being disagreeable. Can you think of anybody in your life, and I don't need any names, but can you think of anybody in your life that can't seem to disagree with you without being disagreeable? Ever work for that guy? Ever had that teacher? Maybe I shouldn't toss this out, but ever been married to that person? Go ahead. Oh, I thought someone was saying something.
Yeah, that's what I do.
Sorry, did you have something, Sherry?
No,
I'm sorry, pardon me.
wasn't me.
Um,
That's okay.
It really doesn't matter if it's what we consider a comfortable conversation or even an uncomfortable one. But even if I'm going to talk to my boss and my boss is going to tell me I'm, somehow not measuring up, I need to improve, blah, 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 I should feel emotionally safe. And the boss is going to talk about my behavior and maybe my lack of performance, but they're not there to judge me as a person. They're there to focus on the positive measures needed to improve my performance. But I'm not fearing some kind of personal attack or insult. And that is again a drop dead requirement for any sort of an interaction, a normal civil interaction for that sake. I mean, I don't tend to hang around people that I worry about punching me in the face. I keep my distance from those kinds of people. Just like I don't really hang around people that feel they have a need to insult me all the time. Now, and maybe I need to be insulted, but I don't really care to hear it. So just keep moving on. But no fear of judgment. I mean, I've been able to, as a leader and manager, I've had to deliver, quite frankly, some bad news and maybe some less than stellar performance reports. But always at the end, I strive to make people comfortable. I strive to make them understand that I'm not here focusing on, this isn't anything against you as a person. It is discussing the behavior. Anybody ever had that responsibility as a leader, or maybe even been in that situation where you had to be counseled that, you need to up their performance but your boss was actually pretty decent about it?
Yeah.
Yes, I just had an employee last week that had been having some tardiness issues. I had to pull them in and have that conversation with them, and I definitely addressed it as a behavior and how can we and you change that behavior in the future, because I want you to stay here and I want you to be successful in our organization, but I need different behavior out of you moving forward.
You don't mind me asking, how did they receive that?
Pretty good, actually, really well. And so much so that later on after that meeting came to me and asked me about some personal issues in his life as well. So I think he accepted it pretty well and wanted some advice about him and his significant other.
I think that's definitely an indicator that you did a good job there. Because if he didn't sense your sincerity, he never would have come back. He never
Yes,
would have
sir.
come back to ask for your advice. So yeah, and that's what it is. You give them a safe environment. It's like raising kids. I mean,
Mhm.
all I did for my kids, quite frankly, was keep them from killing each other and themselves. Give them left and right limits, and I watched them, give them a safe place to make, to make mistakes. Always told them, if you're not making mistakes, you're not doing anything. So making mistakes doesn't bother me. I don't want to see the same ones over and over again.
Because that's
So
insanity.
yeah, yep. New mistakes is what we strive for in life, or is what we did. So, and both of them are still alive and still come back and say hi every now and again. So, everything's context. Judas went out and hanged himself. Matthew. Jesus said, "Go thou and do likewise." Luke. It's all context. So, you've got to set that environment. You can see from these pictures, a lot of people, in fact, when I was looking at this picture earlier today, I honest to goodness stopped and looked around me because I was sitting in a coffee shop in Zurich, and the window frame and the scene outside was deceptively similar to that picture. And I started looking around to see if I was in the coffee shop they took that picture in, but I don't think I was. But you see, it's relaxed. Nobody's going to be relaxed in the conversation if they're not relaxed physically. Coffee's great. I never ever had a staff meeting without food. I usually had donuts, but after a while I got a little health conscious and brought in carrot sticks too. But still, everybody ate the donuts instead. But there is something, and I mean, this has been proven in research, and we all understand it intrinsically. Food relaxes people. Being around food when you can eat food, whether you're hungry or not, causes you part of your mind to relax that I'm taken care of. We had in fact, Hayes, my youngest, still has this dog, little Min Pin, about yay big, rescued about 3 years ago. Poor dog had been mistreated and I'm sure starved at some point because, man, when it comes to food, Hoshi, that's his name. Hoshi is a food hound. He will get it anywhere, anyhow, anytime, and he is so. And you gotta be careful giving him stuff because he likes to snap because he's so food driven. Because somehow in his psyche, back in his earlier life, it was burned into him that if I have food, I better eat it because I don't know if I'm ever getting any more. That kind of attitude sometimes comes through in conversations because if you're trying to have a comfortable conversation with somebody, but 3 months ago somebody that looked a lot like you chewed them out and yelled at them and screamed, there's going to be an unconscious reaction. If they're not careful about it, they'll be bringing that reaction, to interact with you. And food, believe it or not, will help calm some of that stuff. So that relaxed feeling that we all get after a good meal, your mind remembers that. And when food's around, that starts producing some of those calming hormones and chemicals. And then also encourages openness. I'm safe. I can relax. I can talk freely. Um, Relationship dynamics. Yeah, you got to be, mutual respect. Um, it, that's, I don't know that I've ever had a good conversation or even we'll call it a hard conversation, but a productive conversation with somebody I didn't have respect for. I mean, I might not disagree with you, but if I respect that you're looking and expressing your perspective to me honestly and trying to have my best interest in heart, I respect that. Like I say, and don't mean to get into all these politics, but I am, me and Bernie Sanders probably wouldn't agree on who to hire for dog catcher. But I will say I do respect the man because I think he believes what he preaches from what I've seen. Now, I mean, maybe he's just as much politician as everybody else. I don't know. But it seems to me that he is at least a true believer, and that I do respect. So I could have a conversation with Bernie. Probably laugh at him when we're done, but I'd have a conversation with Bernie. Shared purpose. What's the
Brett,
purpose of this comment? Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. Okay, the talking stick thing. This was new to me. I know many of you experienced it, but What if I wanted to have a crucial conversation, let's say with my husband kind of thing, and I made this little talking stick thing and explained to him, we'll pass this back and forth and try to be light about it. Uh, do you think that he could be open to having a crucial conversation there? Or would that be like attacking or something?
Well, I think it would all depend on how you approach it, actually. I mean, you could approach it in a manner that would put him on the defensive, but if you explained it, lightly and kind of said, you know what, I too have some issues jumping in and not listening, and I think this is going to help me.
Mhm.
Would you be willing to try it so I can see if this helps me in the conversation? Maybe that's a way.
Well, that's a good way to say it. Yeah, if you'd be willing to try this. That's
Right.
Yeah, okay.
You might ask Larry. I've never met your husband. I bet Larry has.
Oh yeah.
Just,
Well,
just
the great thing,
don't hit him with the stick when you do.
yeah. Well, the great thing about my husband, we've been married for 42 years, and we always lived by the thing, you never go to bed mad, ever. So we often disagree on things. We may agree what the final thing's supposed to be, but we have different ways of going about it. And so that's what gets us into trouble sometimes. But by the end of the day, we always forgive each other, and everything is good. We love each other. We want to be with each other, and we're happy we're together, even though we don't see how to do things.
That's why you're still together after 40 years.
Yeah.
I have had, and I will say, I have a couple of times gone to bed angry, and it's not good. I mean, you don't sleep well, you get up with indigestion, all the rest. But I have done several times, and I think is the best option. It doesn't mean I have to agree. We don't have to settle everything right now.
Yeah.
But I respect you. I love you. I consider that you have a valid opinion. I'm disagreeing with the opinion on this project right now, but I love you. Let's table our, let's agree to disagree at this point. Let's kiss, pat each other on the head, get a good night's sleep, and then we'll engage this tomorrow. And I think that kind of goes back to that relationship dynamics is a key to this.
Brett, I think that also ties into your next point with shared purpose with this conversation. If you begin that conversation to set boundaries and parameters with the understanding that you're doing this to reach a shared goal that you both agree on, that might help us with it.
Yeah, no, that's exactly it. So, and we use the term, this is a kind of a pet peeve of mine in English. How many of you have ever had an argument with a friend or a colleague or your wife? Anybody? How many of you have ever fought with a friend, a colleague, or your spouse? Two different things, not the same thing. To argue is from a Latin term that literally means to make clear. So we're trying to discuss something. You see it differently. I see it differently. We're trying to either come to my conclusion, your conclusion, or a synthesis of both, but it's going to be clear. That is an argument. Legal briefs, legal things done in a courtroom are called arguments because you're trying to make clear what your case is. Fighting, however, is emotional and visceral and usually not fun. I do thoroughly enjoy a good argument. If you've been around me much, argumentation debate is like a hobby of mine. I love it. I enjoy I don't care. You can pick any topic and give me either side. I don't care. In fact, what I really like to do is we'll pick a topic and I'll take one side, you'll take the other, and then we'll argue about it. And 2 weeks later, we do the same argument and we all switch sides. I find that incredibly amusing, but I'm kind of strange that way. But that's not fighting. Fighting and screaming and throwing. And at the end of an argument, I'm relaxed. I understand a lot more than I did when I went into it. Whether, we've come to a conclusion or I've changed my position or I've learned from them. At the end of the argument, it's a wonderful thing. At the end of a fight, I feel like throwing up. It's different. Having the shared purpose. Why are we talking here? Are we talking to kill time? Are we talking to, we do that. I was hanging out at the train station today and I talked to 3 people. Why? I'm just killing time. And the reason I was killing time with them was because they were the 2 people that spoke English there. Everybody else spoke German. So I was out. I was laughing at Riley, my daughter. We're coming back, sitting on the train, have a little cup of coffee in the little train car there. And she's talking to my youngest child on the phone. back in Colorado. And Riley on the train is speaking German because she's learning German. And she's trying to tell Hayes something in German. And the lady sitting across the train there starts laughing because I don't know what Riley said, but she butchered something really bad in German. This lady was like, no, sweetie, it's like this. So the shared purpose at that time was to make fun of my daughter, which was a lovely conversation we had. But that goes into the next one, the cultural awareness. Now, you know, some of us who grew up in the U.S. and haven't traveled much or hang around the house, maybe you don't interact with a lot of people from different cultures. My particular background, I interact with people from different cultures all the time. And I had to be very aware of certain things, the way you say things, the way you ask things, especially coming from West to Arab cultures, but even in, you know, European cultures, there's some faux pas that Americans especially aren't familiar with. I know JT or Larry's got a story about this one for sure. Tell me some cross-cultural thing you screwed up. And don't tell me you didn't.
Oh, yeah. So, you know, I spent a lot of my career in the Middle East and as what I did for a living, plus still to speak the language. But the cultural differences, even in different countries, were varied. And I know one time, so it wasn't a screw up, but it was something I had to do. I was a guest of honor at a dinner, and they served some things that I really didn't want to eat, but because I was a guest of honor, I can't refuse. So when they brought out the goat head out, and the host reaches in and pulls his eye out and hands it to me, guess what I had to do? So, you know, if you ever eaten a goat eye, you know what I'm talking about. If not, don't go try it.
It's like a salty grape.
Exactly.
All of the things we do for king and country. So, and maybe go ahead. Yeah.
I know I can say for me, well, my husband was originally from Mexico and then he was adopted and he's here in the States, but we would bring his family, his brothers, he had 6 brothers, and we'd bring them a couple at a time back in the 80s and that kind of thing up here to visit. And when they were here, it's like sometimes they would teach me little terms in Spanish. And Steve would also bring his mother. And so when when they'd teach me these little terms, and then I'd be saying them to her, thinking that I was doing something good, but really it was maybe a little off color. And it was, you know, I'd get these looks from her, and then finally Steve would say, "Don't say that to her." It's like it was, I mean, it was fun, and you know, and then they just, I mean, I really, you know, took it okay. It was all right, but it was funny how I was trying to be so serious to communicate, and then, you know, it's like they just, you know, fooled me with these little things.
Riley just mentioned something today, again, on the train, we're coming back. Apparently, a German word for cake is Kuchen or Kuchen. Well, the German word for what's left over when you're done with cake is Kacken. So you got to be real careful when you're complimenting somebody and they're baking that you don't tell them it's really good Kacken.
Yes.
Again, cross-cultural things, very, very, very sensitive here. And then, you know, the emotional state. Why are you here? Are you open to connection? Do you want to just fight? Because I've been around people before, it doesn't matter what you say. They're not interested in arguing. They want to fight. It depends on what I have going on that day. Maybe I'll indulge them, but they're definitely 2 different things. So understand your environment, understand who you're interacting with, why you're there, language, cultural background, especially in the U.S. now. I mean, you get a lot of immigrants, even first generation people, that they speak English with no accents, so you have no idea and maybe that individual was born in the country, but they grew up in first generation immigrant family and they were raised in the culture of their parents' country. And so you got to be careful about that kind of stuff. So this is why it matters. Comfortable conversations are that social glue. And if you think about some of your own experiences, you know, it's not like you're working at it. You know, a comfortable conversation is one that just kind of flows. You don't have to put a lot of effort. You don't have to stop and question the nuance of every term you use and the tone you use because it might be taken wrong. I know in official diplomatic circles, we put a lot of time and effort into words that are used in speeches, words that are used in communiques, who's talking to whom, when they're being talked to. Because in most cultures, the West, especially Americans, very low context culture, which means 90+% of the meaning is actually contained in the word. If I tell you happy in America, you know I'm happy and not glad. The word is the message. But in most cultures, if I tell you something in the morning, it means something different than if I tell you that same thing in the evening. If I tell it to you with this tone versus that tone, it means something different. So all these nonverbals and tonal qualities, all part of communication. So understand that, connect with that person as much as you can. Because ultimately, leadership, in my estimation, is the same as a relationship manifested through conversation. Think about the leadership experiences that you have or have had in the past. Now take all conversation out. Where's the leadership? Where's the relationship? There is none. Conversation manifests the relationship which leads and allows for leadership to occur. Any final thoughts about a comfortable conversation? Anything we miss? Any characteristics that we haven't talked about or read between the lines more important to you? Anyone? What about you, Pam?
I'm sorry, ask the question again.
Said anything about the comfortable conversation? Any points that come to mind that maybe we've missed or haven't explored?
Well, as you've been going through this, probably the point that is hitting me is the dominating person is usually the other person in the conversation. I am the introvert that usually backs down, and to have a comfortable conversation requires pulling out energy to show my side that is not always comfortable, especially if it's something that feels like it's not going to be met well by the other person.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah,
all
that's
very helpful, but I'm the relaxing environment and creating the right context is key.
from my experience at least, it really has helped. I really go out of my way, especially if it's something, if I really have to tell somebody, there's a problem and this is what I think it is, and we need to figure out something to do about this. I really will go out of my way to put a lot of time and effort into planning it. I kind of sort of game it out in my mind. I don't script it, but I will game it out. I'm going to tell Larry his glasses suck. They make him look dumb. But before I tell him that, I'm going to get into the right environment. I'm going to pour him a scotch, get 2 or 3 into him, and but I'm going to set it up, and in my own mind, I'm going to say this. And okay, then what am I going to do if he says that? I'm going to do this or this. Oh, and then what am I going to do? And I just kind of role play a little bit, and again in my own head, and that tends to help me. So maybe that. So we've kind of talked. Everybody, I think, has a maybe an abstract sort of nuanced feeling of what a comfortable conversation is. But sometimes you have to have conversations that and correctly are not going to be comfortable for either party. One of those conversations, and I hope you haven't been in it recently, we'll probably all be in it eventually. Larry's kind of been in it the last couple of days. This is an acronym used by the medical community for conversations with family members when their family member is terminal. So, think of it. You want to talk about an uncomfortable conversation? Your coffee sucks, or you burned dinner last night. How about your dad's going to die in the next 3 days, or your wife's not going to make it, or even may, in my opinion, worse, your kid is going to die at the end of the week, end of the month. That is an uncomfortable conversation, any way you want to cut it. But it is of necessity that it's got to happen. And this is what a lot of the medical community will use for this. So the SPIKES is the obvious acronym. So the setting up the conversation space, it goes back to the environment, the context. The medical team's going to sit down again, probably in a conference room or off to the side somewhere. They're going to have coffee and probably donuts for everybody because, again, they want to set in this calm mood as much as possible. And maybe this is a big one, even before you get into it, is, they would say assessing the patients. I put partner's perception in the situation. What do you know about this situation? Because I see a problem. Do you see a problem? Well, no, there's nothing wrong here. What's the problem? So, okay, now I've got to take the conversation down a little different angle than I wanted to at the first. And then, and this is the key in these uncomfortable conversation, is the invitation. JT, you're okay, but you got this Marine Corps background, and we all know what the Marines are like. Would you like to hear what the problem with the Marine Corps is? And when JT finally says, yeah, the Air Force, fix us.
Please.
Then I can have the conversation. What do you think, JT? Can I fix you?
Let's have that conversation.
But, I think a lot of times, and that's a problem I have with, generally speaking, with the sermon, because the sermon approach doesn't really ask anybody in the congregation, do you want to hear this? Here's what it is. So no, in a conversation, I want permission. I'm going to tell you some things that you might deem or feel uncomfortable about. Is it okay? Do you want to hear these? Because if we don't, there may be some problems, but would you, and again, so you get some kind of buy-in. And then knowledge. What are you actually trying to tell me? Am I trying to tell you I don't like the color of your shirt because that's my opinion and I think you should wear blue instead of red? Or is what I'm actually giving you objective knowledge about the situation? That's a question for you to answer yourself before you ever think about having a conversation with somebody. A lot of bosses get into this. I don't like the way you did something. Okay, fine. Does it materially impact the job or the mission? Because if it doesn't, maybe it's a better way. Who knows? So what am I actually trying to tell you? Empathy. Oh man, you ever thought about that? You ever thought about the student or the person walking in who's just, they're very proud of themselves. They're doing a great job, only to be told, you know what? You suck. You ever been on that end of the conversation? You ever wonder what that person feels like? You might want to think about it. And in this context, for the medical people, that, your kid's going to die in about 60 days. Now let that sink in. What is that person feeling? You need to have some inkling of that before you start these sorts of difficult conversations. And then, and most important, what's your strategy after this? And this, maybe you should put this, make this in double S spikes. You have strategy before you even start. And your strategy carries you through the end. Why am I doing this? What do I hope to accomplish out of it? And what end state am I trying to achieve? Because if I'm just trying to make you mad, I can do that real easy. But if I'm trying to get you to understand my perspective and hopefully maybe change your behavior or some other objective, I need to understand that first. So, I think one of the best ways to deal with these kind of conversations is to think about what the comfortable ones are like and try to mimic the comfortable conversation as much as possible. Questions, comments, snide remarks? Well, like I said in class, when there's no questions, I did a bang up job. Larry, over to you.
Thanks, Brett. Appreciate everything. So what we've covered today is the preparation prior to having a conversation. That's key. Without the preparation, the conversation is mostly not going to go. So next week, Jeremy's going to be talking about conversations about to start. We're right in the middle of it. So what do we do? What does that look like during a crucial conversation? JT, is there anything that you want everybody to be prepared to bring to the conversation here next week?
Well, I think just reflecting on what kind of prep work really sets you up for having that good conversation. I think, Sherry's question about, I've got a tool, a technique, I've got the stick that I want to bring into this conversation. Well, the prep, maybe throwing that stick out there in the heat of an argument or a conversation may not be the best time to surface that. So maybe prepping that space earlier when there is no contention and maybe there's an understanding and, the emotions are low, and just say, hey, I think maybe we can consider doing this as a way to facilitate better understanding in our conversations. Would you mind, if we brought out this particular technique? And now you've set the groundwork a little bit, and so it's not a surprise, and it may not be as well received in the heat of the moment, but people generally, once they've agreed to something, will go through with it, in the moment, just because they want to be consistent with what they had said. So maybe just thinking about some of that prep work and how that's worked for you in setting conversations. But we'll really dive into the meat and potatoes of some techniques and approaches to trying to have a good conversation once that prep work has been done.
Awesome.
I may have my talking stick by next week.
There you go. We'd love to hear that story. And hopefully I still have a brother-in-law when you're done. So I'll give you guys a little bit of homework to prepare for this is write down what your first sentence will be starting that conversation. Think about it. And then maybe list your top 3 emotional triggers that we want to make sure you're managing or staying away from. And then finally, ask yourself, what outcome do you want from this conversation? And again, you guys will get these in the recap email that's going to go out in about an hour. I'm going to try and get the recording on there as soon as I get home. So if I don't get home in time for it to go out, I'll send another email. But thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week, same time.
Bye, everyone.
All right, bye-bye. Have a great week.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
All right, JT, Brett, I'll contact you guys in a little bit and we'll do a recap. I got to hit the road, get back home. All right, see you.